It's 6 months since Hamas attacked Israel on October the 7th, killing more than 1,200 people and taking more than 250 hostage. In Gaza, more than 33,000 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli military since the start of the conflict, many of them civilians. But despite increasing global pressure for a ceasefire, the fighting is still ongoing. In the aftermath of October the 7th, Israel's allies rallied in support, and a flurry of world leaders flew into Tel Aviv to stand side by side with Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli war cabinet. However, as the war has ground on, the number of civilians killed has risen, and the humanitarian crisis inside Gaza worsened. Israel has started to lose support for its military campaign. The relationship between President Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu has broken down. Biden has been openly critical of the Israeli Prime Minister.
Cannot have 30,000 more Palestinians dead as a consequence of going after. There's other ways to deal with the trauma caused by Hamas.
Around the world, there have been massive marches in support of the Palestinian people. There has also been a worrying increase in the number of anti-Semitic attacks reported. Israel's military campaign began with a massive aerial bombardment of Gaza, followed by a ground invasion a few weeks later.
For your immediate safety, we urge all residents of northern Gaza and Gaza City to temporarily relocate south.
Israeli forces have moved systematically through Gaza and are now as far south as the second city of Khan Yunis. Around 1.5 million Gazans have fled their homes in search of some safety, and they're now mostly living in rough conditions, crammed into a small area near the Egyptian border. Fighting has destroyed vast swathes of Gaza, as I saw for myself when I went into the centre of Khan Yunis back in February.
We've just reached the centre of Khan Yunis. It's just been captured, taken by the IDF. They think they've got control of it now, but there's a lot of gunfire still going on. And it was clearly, I mean, just look around, clearly a very, very heavy battle here.
Sporadic fighting continues in the north of Gaza as Hamas tries to regroup. And Israel has said that it will go into the southern city of Rafah, Hamas's last remaining stronghold, and currently the temporary refuge of around 1.3 million displaced civilians.
We will act in Rafah. It will take a few weeks, it will happen.
But the international community is warning against it, fearing a bloodbath unless the huge numbers of refugees can be moved elsewhere. In late November, Israel and Hamas agreed to a temporary ceasefire and the release of some of the hostages. 105 hostages were freed over a 7-day truce period, and in return, Israel released 240 Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails. It's estimated 130 hostages remain in Gaza, many of them presumed dead. Talks brokered by Qatar and Egypt have repeatedly broken down, but the gap is said to be slowly narrowing. Hamas has been demanding a permanent ceasefire and the withdrawal of all Israeli forces from Gaza. But Israel will only agree to a temporary truce and wants to keep its soldiers in place. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was already unpopular within Israel before October the 7th. For a few months, the anti-government protests calmed as the nation rallied behind the war. But that has changed, and the weekly demonstrations are again growing in size. Many in Israel hold Netanyahu responsible for the terror attacks and think he should resign. Others are angry that he has seemingly prioritised the military campaign and his own political survival over efforts to agree a new hostage deal.
A disaster for a very, very long time, which became worse on October 7th.
Everything is broken. We need a new government to bring back Israel to what it can be.
Gaza is in the middle of a major humanitarian crisis, with 70% of people there estimated to be on the brink of famine. There is an ongoing row between Israel and pretty much the rest of the world over the lack of aid getting into Gaza. Israel claims it is letting in enough, and that the UN is to blame for not distributing it effectively. But aid organisations, the US, the UK, the EU and others all say that Israel should be doing more. Most hospitals have been hit by the fighting and many are no longer operational.
This is the former emergency department of National Medical Complex. And it's a death zone.
Frustrated by the slowness of the landboardness, countries started airdropping aid and a maritime corridor has now been opened. Almost 200 humanitarian workers have been killed in the war. And then in early April, the Israeli military struck an aid convoy in central Gaza, killing 7 aid workers, including 3 Britons, an Australian and a Polish man. Israel's allies demanded answers.
We were outraged to learn of an IDF strike that killed a number of civilian humanitarian workers yesterday from the World Central Kitchen, which has been relentless in working to get food to those who are hungry in Gaza and quite frankly around the world.
An estimated 13,000 Hamas fighters have been killed in the war, according to Israeli figures. They include Marwan Issa, Hamas's number 3. But the leader of Hamas in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, remains alive and on the run. And until Israel can kill or capture him, they cannot say they have defeated Hamas. And until they get their hostages home, they cannot declare outright victory.